So, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you again to another SALT Talks. My name is Payee. I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator, trainer for the SALT Talks. We host these every month through the school year, and this month our theme is understanding and utilizing benefits. What are the benefits out there? What can we apply for? What services are available? And then just understanding them. Understanding them is one of the key points why we have SALT Talks, because so many times we have so many topics to deal with in the transition world. And as our child goes from that 17 to 18, there's a lot of transition. From high school to adulthood, there's transition. So we always like to try to target those topics to help you get through that stage of life with your child. So tonight we are talking about Social Security. Now, this is a part one of two. So tonight we're going to be focusing on Social Security, the benefits, SSI, SSDI, how you navigate that, and a little, finding out what this payee is. What does that mean? So I have Debi Schwartz here tonight. And I'll let her introduce herself because I could tell you all about her. I've known her for a long time, but I'll let her introduce herself. And I'll go ahead and share my screen while you talk, Debi, okay?
Fine. Hi everyone. My name is Debi Schwartz. Some of you may have been to things that I have done in the past, or may have talked to you. If not, I'm happy to meet with you, or answer your questions. Just to let you know a little about who I am and why they have me coming to give this presentation. I worked for the Social Security Administration for 39 years. And Well, that's the second night. Um, there we go.
There we go. Yep.
Um,
Sorry about
um,
that.
no, you're fine. Doesn't take much to distract me. I'm like that cat and sees the squirrel run. Um, so I worked for Social Security for 39 years before retiring 6 years ago to do this privately. And so I have a lot of experience with helping individuals with disabilities returning to work, figuring out how work will impact their benefits, if anything at all. Also, how to file, best tips on filing, and that kind of information as well. But in addition to that professional way of looking at it, I'm also the parent of two children with a disability. My oldest is 45 and legally blind. My 33-year-old is on the autism spectrum and has a seizure disorder. So, moving with them through school and transitioning and so forth, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I've often thought that as a parent who is thought of myself as being very well connected, whether it was I knew who to call at Ohio Legal Rights, I knew who to call at Legal Aid, I knew what to ask for at the school system. Um, if I was as frustrated as I sometimes was trying to deal with all of this, how frustrated parents who didn't have access to those resources must be. So, along the way, if you see something that you don't understand or you have a question about, you can ask me at the time or you can ask me at the end. Patty this time has been very generous to give me 2 weeks to get all of this in. I used to try to cram everything in an hour, 20 minutes. But there's so much information out there, and I want to make sure that I share as much of it as I can with everybody. And so we have plenty of time to go over and ask any pressing questions that you may have. Okay,
Go ahead.
next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, my objectives are for this time to to demystify Social Security and eliminate the fear. The agency, Social Security Administration, has always been a little intimidating. Since COVID, they've lost a lot of employees, haven't picked up many, and some of those aren't well trained yet. And so it makes it even more frustrating when you're trying to deal with the office. So we'll talk about that. I will talk about the different programs that there are because I'll have people say, well, I'm on disability. Well, there's different disability programs. Which one are you under? The one that you are receiving benefits from or your child is receiving benefits from will make a difference on how much you can earn and still maintain that benefit. And so we'll talk about strategies next week on how to deal with that. But this week, we're going to talk about the different programs so that you understand that there's more than one to look for. Learn how to qualify and how to apply. That's where we're going to go today. You know, what do you need to do? What do you need to wait for? How are the ways you can do that? And then next week, we'll talk about work incentives, how work impacts each one of the different kinds of benefits and what that will look like. Okay, go ahead. So there are two different kinds of two programs outside of Medicare that are administered by the Social Security Administration. Social Security Disability or SSDI. That's the one where an individual has worked and paid into Social Security or has a parent, and you're a qualifying dependent on that parent's record where they have worked and paid into Social Security, and now you're receiving an insurance payment back because they are either retired, deceased, or disabled, and you have a disability. SSI is supplemental security income. The I has a totally different meaning. This is a program based not only on having a disability that Social Security finds qualifying, but it's also based on financial need. So a lot of the same questions and financial restrictions that you have around Medicaid. So anybody who's ever had to complete a Medicaid application will know what that looks like. And so you can see when we get into it a little more, you'll understand why they ask the questions that they do. On the Social Security side, if you have a parent, if you're under 18 or 18, 19, still in high school, and you have a parent who is receiving retirement benefits from Social Security or disability benefits through Social Security, or they have passed away and they had paid into Social Security that you could be receiving as a survivor, you can receive that benefit as a dependent, whether you have a disability or not. So up until age 18, Social Security is not even going to look to see whether or not you have a disability. It doesn't matter. You're eligible for that cash only benefit regardless of disability. However, at age 18 comes about 2 months before, there will be a letter that goes out that says, getting ready to turn 18, your benefits are going to get ready to terminate. But if you're still in school, get this form filled out by the school and verify it, and we'll keep your check going until you graduate or turn 19. And if you have a disability, you want to file that disability application now. So you can continue to receive as a dependent child while you are looking to see if you qualify as a disabled adult child. We'll go over a little bit more of that in a second, but the idea is that if you are under the age of 22, if your disability started prior to age 22, you would be considered a legal dependent on that parent. And so you could file for a disabled adult child benefit on that parent unless you've been able to perform substantial work on your own past age 22, or you've gotten married where your spouse becomes your legal dependent, although there's some exceptions to that as well. Um, so that's really important. It becomes especially important. The disabled adult child benefit becomes especially important when you have maybe they're receiving the SSI disability program benefit because mom and dad haven't retired, and now mom or dad are retirement age and file for benefits. If you can establish that the disability for that child occurred prior to age 22, they could apply for benefits on that parent's record, even at the time they're 45 years old. Now, the hard part with that, and we'll talk about that here when we get to preparing for application time, is to make sure that you have medical records to establish that that disability happened prior to age 22. So if the pediatrician is retiring and that practice is closing, so you can get a copy of those medical records and then store them away. If you get a decision from Social Security after age 18, but prior to age 22 on the SSI side, then you've pretty well established that. But not everybody does that. And so I want to make sure we're clear that you're going to need to show that that disability occurred prior to age 22. Now, on SSI, again, supplemental security income, the SSI disability program has two different sets of criteria. One is under the age of 18. It is far easier to be approved under the age of 18 than it is over the age of 18. There was a court case about 30 years ago that said it wasn't fair to see whether a 4-year-old could work at a substantial level. That was a little ridiculous. So they came up with new criteria. Social Security lost the big court case. And so they established policies that compared your child's disability to that of other children of that same age. And so and under age 18, mom and dad's income and assets would count. At age 18, new criteria. So if you've already been receiving as a child, you're going to have to reapply, or they're going to do a review to get that adult decision on there. But mom and dad's income no longer counts. And mom and dad's assets no longer count. So a lot of times that's when we find that somebody is eligible for benefits. Okay. So let's kind of go through that in another way. We'll break this down even further. So the student SSI student benefits, they're received based on the parent's record. The student benefit under 18, 19, still in high school, does not have to be disabled and can earn a significant amount of money and still draw that student benefit. Next. The Social Security disability benefit for a disabled child is, like I said, at age 18, the student has to file a separate disability application to have benefits continued due to disability. This may also be a time where a non-working parent who maybe has to stay home or can only hold down a part-time job because their primary job is to care for this adult child with a disability can apply for child and care benefits. Usually, a parent who's receiving child and care benefits has those benefits end when the youngest child of that worker turns 16. Social Security's theory is that they no longer need to be home working, or I mean home taking care of that child so they can go to work. But if you can document that you have a child with a disability, then you can go ahead and have that benefit continue because you're providing substantial care for that child. That could be they need help getting dressed every day, getting feeding, getting on and off the school bus. They can't do and all of that by themselves as a normal 16-year-old without a disability might be able to do. Also, under the Social Security disability benefit, that student can file on their own record with adequate quarters of coverage. Now, for somebody who is maybe in their 40s or 50s, they're going to need at least 40 quarters or 10 years of work in order to be eligible for Social Security disability benefits. But obviously, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old hasn't had that long to have that ability to work. So they don't need as many quarters. Under 21, they only need 6 quarters, so a year and a half's worth of work. It only takes a couple $1,000s to earn a quarter of coverage. So you could have a student with part-time work. I remember my oldest son who went legally blind when he was 20 in early 20s, but when he was in high school, he kind of groused when he would get his paycheck from his part-time summer work jobs and complained about all of the Social Security tax he was paying, how it was unfair he had to pay that Social Security tax. And then when he went to work at the bank, they were taking out a lot more, and he really complained until his vision got so bad the bank wouldn't work with him anymore, and he had to file for Social Security benefits. Well, he had been paying in since he was like 16 years old, and he had a really decent benefit amount. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't complaining anymore. But it's something just to be aware of, that when you're looking for disability benefits when your child turns 18 or 19, to not just look and think about the SSI, but if they've had a part-time job, maybe they have a school program that they're involved in, or an internship or a co-op, or they've been working in during school time, or they have part-time jobs during the summer. This would be the time when you would want to explore that Social Security disability benefit. And as we'll talk about next week, you'll see why that becomes very important, because on your own Social Security disability benefit record or as an adult child, there's a lot more that you can do and still work and still draw that benefit. Okay, let's go to the next screen. SSI benefits. As I already said, SSI benefit is based on financial need. If the child is under the age of 18, there's all sorts of things that go into calculating whether or not the child is eligible. So when you file for that SSI program, they're going to ask, and the child is under 18, they're going to ask questions like, how many parents are in the household? How much money do they make each month? Are there any other children without a disability in the household that we can maybe funnel some of that money off to them so it doesn't count for this child? How much money do you have in the bank? So there could be a time when there's no benefit available, and they're not even looking at the disability. I had to tell somebody the other day that their severely disabled son wasn't going to be eligible right now because mom and dad's income was too high, even though the child has severe disability. But at age 18, they should recontact us. If the child is 18 or older, only their income their assets and their living situation is used in establishing financial need. So this is where I see a lot of our transition youth, where you'll be able to apply, even in the event that they do not have, um, even if they've not been eligible before, this would be the time when they would be eligible. Before we talk about getting started on how to apply, does anybody have any questions on anything I've covered so far? If somebody's
Yeah, I don't see any questions out there yet.
okay, okay,
Feel free to put
yeah,
them in the chat. Anybody who is looking or has a question as we're going through this, as you're, maybe depending where you're at, feel free to just drop it in the chat box and we'll address them, or you can ask them outright at the end.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's not a problem, but we're going to start talking about the application process. And so, how long is the look back for the child's asset after age 18? There isn't. So if the month they are 17 or the last month of 17 or the month of age 18, you divest yourself of their assets, you can't file till the first of the following month, but you could do that. So I do know of parents who maybe grandparents left them some money and they just hadn't yet slipped it into a stable account. I'll answer Michelle's question in a second. Um, you can't, I mean, you have to, at the time of application, at the month of application, have less than $2,000 in assets. So it may be that you need to get that special needs trust that would meet Social Security's qualifications with the Medicaid payback in order to divest of income, put it into a stable account, um, something like that, so that you can make the child eligible and have less than $2,000. But there's no look back period like there is for long-term care Medicaid. Um, you get rid of it one month, you can file the following month. The other question that came up was, can you apply for both benefits? Yes, you can. Or SSI supplemental security income, a supplement your other income to bring you up to a base amount. So maybe your student has worked and paid a little bit into Social Security, but their benefit amount, okay, I'll get to Jody in a second, but in the event that you have, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. If they've worked and they've paid in, but let's say it's based on how much you've worked and paid in, maybe their benefit amount is only $300 or $400 a month. The SSI, the full SSI benefit amount is $943. So it's possible that you file the SSDI benefit and get that money, and they also apply then for the SSI to supplement up to that $943. So it's very possible that you could be receiving both. Now, Jody, the question came up and down before I could read the whole thing. Can you just state your question? Unmute and ask.
I can read it if she'd like.
Oh, okay. That if you're retired and drawing Social
Yep.
Security benefits and you have children drawing benefits, is there a family max? Yes, there is. And that amount is based on how much the worker has worked and paid in through their time of working all those years. It's 40 years. Um, they use the highest 35 years in calculating the benefit amount. And from that, they extrapolate an amount that's also then available for the family. So what they do is they take the family amount minus the worker's amount and distribute the balance among any of the family, the children. So if there are 3 eligible children, they'll divide it by 3. If there are 2 eligible children, they'll divide it by 2. So a lot of it just depends on how much, but yes, there is a family maximum. Did I miss any other questions?
I think you got them so far that we have.
Perfect. Okay, next slide is just a pictorial to say how do we get started. And then we'll get to the payee versus guardianship. This is the new slide that I've added this year, and I was talking to Patty about this. Up until recently, I hardly had any parent who told me that they delayed or deferred filing for their adult child's SSI disability benefit pending guardianship. I'm hearing it a lot anymore. And so I just want to make it very clear that when they turn 18, that following month, you can apply for the SSI disability benefit, even if you have not received guardianship paperwork yet. It is not a requirement from Social Security that you be a legal guardian in order to apply for that application. Now, if they do not have a legal guardian, they're going to have to sign their own paperwork. And maybe that's with an X and you and your spouse have to witness it, but that's okay. They can do that. You can assist them in the application process. And we're going to have some conversations here in a few minutes on what that looks like. However, it hurts my heart to hear that you've lost benefits because you waited, because that guardianship paperwork can take months to process through probate court. And SSI starts with the month you file. So if you waited 6 months or you waited a year, you've lost that much in benefits. If in doing their disability review, Social Security determines that your student or your child is disabled and qualifies for SSI or Social Security disability benefits, but that they are not capable of managing their own money, Social Security can appoint you to be the representative payee. You know, what that looks like in practicality is you set up a bank account. Like my account says Debi Schwartz for representative payee for Andrew Schwartz. I'm the only one who can write a check. I'm the only one who can debit card. He tried taking his birthday money in one day to cash that birthday check, and they wouldn't do it because it was a payee account. And that indicated to them that he needed guidance on that, on spending that birthday money. Social Security can ask you for an accounting once a year on how the money was spent, but it's very, very basic. It's much easier than guardianship paperwork through probate court. The questions are, how much did you spend on food and shelter? How much did you spend on their personal items? How much, if any of it, did you save? So it's a very basic report, just wanting to make sure that you are being responsible and taking care of their benefits for them. In addition, though, in administering the money, you're also, as representative payee, responsible for doing any reporting that needs to go to Social Security. So if they get a job, you need to let Social Security know and submit the paperwork and update the paycheck stubs, which we'll talk about more next week. if they change their address, if they get married, if their income changes. You as a representative payee are called upon to do that reporting to Social Security for your child because they're not capable of doing that on their own. None of that, though, requires legal guardianship. I'm not saying whether or not you should get legal guardianship. That's a topic I think is covered in a different SALT talk. Um, and there could be good reasons to apply for legal guardianship. It's just that it's not necessary in order to do the Social Security application process. Okay, let's go to the next screen and we'll talk about how to file an application. This is a simplified version of it, but I'm going to tell you a couple of different ways to do it. Most of the ways are free. I'm always available to help. It's just that I do this as a business, so I charge. But these are the ways you can do it for free. You can call Social Security's toll-free number and set up an appointment to do the application with Social Security, either in person or by telephone. If you do it by telephone with Social Security, my strong suggestion is that you have the student with you when you file. There are some offices, especially the two that are in your geographic area, they get real picky about proper applicant and they want to talk to the student or the child with a disability themselves. But once you call and you set that appointment, even if you ultimately go online and do the application yourself, you've started the clock on when payments can start. And so that's really important to call and set up that appointment. You can also go to Social Security's website, socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov. Either one takes you to the same place. And you can set up a My Social Security account for your child. And you can complete the disability report form and application online. Now, filing for SSI online is still kind of iffy. They're just now adding the SSI financial questions onto the application. And so what I suggest parents do is go through the Social Security disability application and through that application, start the process, do all that. There is a question in that SSDI application that says, do you wish to file for SSI? And you can check yes. So that will protect you for that SSI portion. But then after that, it gives you access to that disability report form. Very, very important form to fill out. We'll talk in a little bit about how to be prepared. That'll be the next slide. But understand the Social Security needs a preponderance of evidence to establish that your child has a disability that's going to keep them from working at a substantive level for at least 12 consecutive months. So there's nowhere in there where you have to say they're permanently disabled forever. There's nothing in there where you have to sign off saying they're never going to be able to do anything. Or maybe they're only working 4 hours a day, 2 days a week, because that's all they can do. You don't have to say, well, they're working doing something, so they must not be eligible. This year, substantial level earnings are construed to be $1,550 a month gross. So if you have a child who's 18 and at that moment would not be able to work at a job earning at least $1,550 a month without help, without guidance, without supports, then you should go ahead and file. And if they're working just a couple of days a week, a little bit each time, maybe as part of a work study program, maybe something through Project Life or Project Search, or through the vocational program that is giving them a small pay or a small stipend, that's not going to be enough to make them ineligible. They're not going to say they're not eligible because they can work 6 hours a week. Not going to happen. But we do want to show that this disability is going to keep them from being able to work for at least 12 months without support. Now, I mean, the argument can be made that maybe if they continue to get help and support and job coaching and job developing and find the right employer, that maybe down the road somewhere when they are reviewed, they'll find that they have medically recovered enough, or they have found, despite their disability, that they can work and earn and make over $1,550 a month. In fact, that's what we're going to talk about a lot. That's what we're going to talk a lot about next week. A question, there's a couple of them that have come through. I saw the last one says, if they're a college student, can they still apply? Yes, absolutely. Whether they're still in high school, deferring diploma, or they've gone to college, that doesn't necessarily mean they have the capacity to go out and get a job and work at a full-time level. Going to college for a couple of hours a day, maybe 4 days, 3 or 4 days a week, is a lot different than working 40 hours a week. But again, I have a college student that is receiving a lot of assistance at the college. This college student disability union is providing a lot of extra support, a lot of extra assistance. That's certainly something that you want to make part of that disability application. Make sure in the remarks section, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but make more of an effort to explain that they need help even going to college. Somebody wants another child turns 18 next February. The month they turn 18 is just fine because we filed the following month. My daughter turns 18 at the end of May. When should we apply for SSI? June, anytime after June 1st. Son receives SSI. How many credits does he need? Depends on how old your son is. If he's 21 or under, it's only 6 quarters. And then he needs 2 more for every year after that. And by the time he's 31, he needs the same 20 or 20 quarters of work. And how does he switch over? That's a transition that, as you notice, he's working and paying into Social Security. After his taxes hit every year, you can always call Social Security and say, does he have enough quarters down? SSI will eventually figure it out. If he's on SSI benefits, it's something that they monitor, but it does take them a while to catch up to it. They do go back a year to pay those, so it's not like they'll lose anything. Does the amount they can make change each year? Yes, it does. And we'll talk more about that next month. Okay, so I'm trying to make sure that I haven't missed any of the questions.
I think you got them all.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were coming in fast and furious,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh no.
Mhm.
I mean, it's great. I would rather answer people's questions and make, because I can sit here and tell you what I think you need to know, but I really want to make sure that you learn what you really want to know. So that's perfect. Okay, if you want to go to the next slide. the one that says be prepared. I cannot tell you how important that disability report form is. Um, I have people whose child, and this is the last actual formal application. We're really whipping through this tonight, Patty. Um, but we'll cover some time on this and then I can answer some questions, some more questions. But a lot of times parents only focus on whatever the primary disability is, whether that's autism, trisomy 23, cerebral palsy, anxiety or depression or bipolar, whatever it is, seizure disorder. But they don't really look at the big picture. We want Social Security to look at the entire picture. And so if your child, like my son Andrew, I pick on him all the time, God love him. He's 33 now and is living independently and has a part-time job and is on SSDI as a disabled adult child. So I mean we've done a lot of transitioning throughout. But Andrew, I mean, his primary diagnosis, I suspect, would be he's on the autism spectrum with intellectual developmental delays. But he also has a seizure disorder. He also has anxiety, which can trigger and cause problems with the seizure disorder. He also has brittle bone syndrome and has been known to break his back in several places because of a seizure. So it's something where you don't want to just put autism spectrum, because then all they're going to be looking at is his IQ score and his GAP score. No, I wanted them to look at everything because it might be a little bit from here and a little bit from this, and his depression or anxiety isn't severe enough to do anything. But boy, if he gets anxious about something, it's going to trigger seizure, and then he's not going to be able to do anything. And so they have to know all of that. So you have to list all of that. You also have to list all of the medical sources. And this can take some time. So if your child is not 18 yet and you've got some time, this might be a good time to go thumbing through that my chart and start taking notes. Name, address, telephone number, and approximate dates of service for every medical treating source they've had. Now, if they've had 7 different doctors at Children's Base, then you can just list Children's Base under the hospitals, and then in the what kind of care did they receive, list the 7 different doctors or list the 7 different divisions or departments that they were treated by at Children's Base. But they were Children's Base and at Children's Liberty Township and the one in Hamilton and the one in Anderson. And you want to list them all and what that was done at each one of them, because they want to make sure that they get those records. Some receive testing at Children's Base, but the PT and the physical therapy is going to be done at a different hospital. They need to know that information as well. Question came through: if the testing for autism was done at 2, does it need to be done again? Yeah, probably. If the child is in school, there's probably been an ETR or some other sort of evaluation done at the school, so they know what kind of plan to implement in the IEP. So that would be a good place to start and get that evaluation. If you have insurance or something that would pay for an external evaluation or something, the more recent it is, the better, because otherwise they're going to send them to somebody of their own liking and they're not going to do a good job. School records. The most recent IEP is important, but also that evaluation that they do in order to prepare that IEP. Or if they're receiving speech, language therapy, OT, or PT at school, maybe a medical report from the therapist. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get all of these medical records yourself. For the school, you might. I've found that some schools are historically lax in responding to Social Security's request. Either Social Security has a quick turnaround time and they can never make it to the quick turnaround time, or it could just be that schools in general just don't like filling out those forms, or they go to the wrong place. So those I would submit to Social Security directly. Or if you know your pediatrician left, but before they left, they did a big evaluation and you have a copy of it, then that might be something. You just want to make sure that all that evidence gets into the file. You want to list all the medications that they're taking for all of their disabilities, whether it's their primary disability or the Claritin that they have to take because of allergies. Everything, but everything in that application. Work history. If they've done a work study program, question is, how far back should you go? All the way. I mean, for school records, you can just get the most recent evaluation, but for medical records, all the way back to when they were born, if that's when their disability began. But for work history, you're going to want to document if they're working with OOD and Board of Developmental Disabilities, and they did a 6-week work study program during the summer or at school. You want to know when it started, when it ended. They're going to ask what they did. And you can then put into the remarks section, this is what worked about that work study. This is what they found, and it didn't work when they did the work study. So that you can make sure that you put everything in there to explain why they weren't able to do that job. I've had some that have tried a job and maybe they couldn't read the visual cues, or maybe they couldn't follow a 3-step process, and so they were not able to hold that job. You want to let them know that there was an attempt, that they did try that job and it just didn't work. Notice at the bottom in ginormous letters, it says completed remarks section. The very, very last question on the disability report form, whether you were doing it on the internet or you were doing it with the Social Security representative by phone or in person, is there anything else you want us to know? Now, I get it. If you've already been on the phone with them for an hour and a half as they're answering all these questions, you may just want to no, I'm finished, I'm done. However, that remarks section could be the most important question on that entire disability report form. If your son or daughter will walk out in the middle of February in a t-shirt and shorts, if you don't stop them and make them come in and put in weather appropriate clothing, you need to put that in there. If they have a propensity to think everybody wants to be loved and they want to hug everybody, and that made their fellow employees uncomfortable, you want to put that in there. That could be a problem in a job. If they weren't fast enough at the 2 jobs that they tried to do and the employer wasn't, giving them an accommodation, or they couldn't, after a while, they still weren't able to pick up the speed enough, you want them to know that. If they have a meltdown, don't just say when they get frustrated, they have a meltdown. Describe the meltdown. Does the meltdown mean that they scream and yell and run around the room? Do they bang their head up against the wall? Do they bang it on the floor? Do they put their fist through the wall? Those are the kind of things that you want to make sure that the person, the medical examiner in Columbus, that's going to be making that medical decision has that, because then they're going to have the medical records, they're going to have the school records, and then they're going to have, and here is our child's reality. Yes, they have this IQ and this GAF score, but this is their reality. And then they can see the whole picture. I've seen decisions hinge on those completed remarks. Isn't that right, Patty?
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just really, really important. The good thing is if you're doing it by yourself on the internet, you can get halfway through it and go, man, I've been working on this for 45 minutes. My head hurts. I need a cup of coffee and I need to take a nap. You can save what you've done, get a re-entry number, back out, and go back in later and finish it up. And that is the best service that you can give to your child, because I cannot stress enough how important that disability report form is. What happens after you've submitted that? Well, like I said, right now, the Social Security Administration is just inching their way into having part of that SSI financial stuff be online and tie into the disability report. So if you did it in order to get to the disability report form, you went into the Social Security disability portal application. At the end of it, you've done the disability part, but there's still going to be that SSI part. So if you've called and set up an appointment for the SSI part, they can then do that 10-minute SSI part over the phone with you then. Some offices, not often in your area, but some offices will see that an online application has been received within the office. They get an alert, and then they will contact you to do that 5 or 10 minute SSI financial part before they can send it up to Columbus. And since every office does it differently, and there are, 60 offices in the state of Ohio, I can't tell you which way your office is going to go. So call and set up the appointment so you have an official appointment date. So even if they don't call you within a week to say, hey, we see you filed that online application, let's take care of the rest of it, you have a date certain that they're going to call you and do that part of it. Do the online part if you can. If not, prepare for get as prepared as you can for that disability application with them. Some folk want to know, what do I do when I do it for parents? Basically, what I do is I give you your homework to give me all of this stuff: the medical record, the names, addresses, and phone numbers of doctors and hospitals, physical therapists, speech therapists, all of that stuff. List the diagnoses, the medications, the work history. Write me up a remarks section and send it to me a couple of days before I call. And I will sit with you on the phone and I will go through that disability online application. It still is not going to negate Social Security needing to do the it's not going to negate the need for them to do that SSI financial part. So whether they call you within a few days of you doing the online report to say, hey, we saw you did this part, we need to get the rest of it, or they wait until your actual appointment date to do that 5 or 10 minute part. that part is not accessible to me right now or to you. So they're still going to have to contact you for that part. But at least you know that it has been sent up and you've provided the best possible product that you can in order to make sure that that benefit is approved the first time around. Because I know a lot of people believe that you have to appeal a couple of times in order to get approved. It's not that so much as my experience when I worked at the agency was I didn't have enough information to make the right decision the first time around. But by providing all of the information at the very beginning, you should be able to bypass that. I'm getting a whole bunch of questions here. So let's see. If my, okay. Patty said your remark section was about 4 pages long.
Mhm.
The longest I've had was 16 pages
Mm.
on one that I did. So obviously it exceeded the 2,000 characters. So what I did was summarize a little bit of it and said, a detailed remark section is being sent to you. And then I faxed it to that office that day for them to associate with the file. The person was approved, so um okay, if my 19-year-old doesn't have any work, I'm having trouble getting this to go down.
I can
Or
read
doesn't
it. If
have any work record, should it go for filing the SSI and avoid the SSDI? If you're setting up an SSI appointment with Social Security and you're not going to try it online, then yes, sure. The problem is that they're just now dipping their toe into the pool of letting you do the SSI online and have it tied to the disability application. So you have to do the SSDI application to get to the disability form online. They're working on it. My friend is coming up that works at headquarters is going to be here at Easter time, and I'm going to bend his ear a little bit more as to when this is going to be better. But they're working on it. So right now, the only workaround is to do it as an SSDI application, indicate on there that you want to file for SSI, that gets you tied in and linked up to the disability form, which is what the disability application is all about. The rest of it is name, address, phone number, how much money do you have in the bank. The really important part is the disability part, and that way that you can do that online. And if you've set up an appointment to file the SSI, they'll make sure that other financial part gets taken care of. Do SSI benefits go up and down when they are no longer a full-time student? The SSI benefit amount is not based on whether or not they're a full-time student, it's whether or not they have any other income. When do we need to gather for the financial part on the phone? If they are over 18, it's do they have a bank account? Do we know that there's less than $2,000 in that bank account? There's gonna be a long list of things that they're gonna ask them if they have. They're allowed a vehicle and they're allowed a home to own a home as long as they're living in them. So, or they have just one car and they're using it, and if they own a home, they're living in the home. So those are excluded. But burial plots, crypts, caskets, urns, insurance policies that have a cash surrender value, savings bonds, certificates of deposit, promissory notes, IOUs. They're going to ask all of those questions. Your child may not have any of them, and you just say, no, they don't. If they find that they do have one of those, you'll just have to provide a copy of it. When you fill out the SSDI, would Social Security say you are eligible for both? If you file the Social Security, the SSDI part online, and they find that they don't have enough quarters, They'll just send them a letter saying you applied for SSDI and you don't qualify because you don't have enough quarters. That does not negate the application for the SSI. So you get, if you end up applying for both, you get two different decisions. Okay. Is there another question or am I missing it?
I think you got them all.
Okay. We've got time left. Does somebody want to just ask me a question? Because I'm really struggling reading that through. You have to apply. Do you have to apply for SSDI and SSI separately? They are two separate applications, yes. But the SSDI application online is the one that links you to the disability application. That's the only reason you would do that. But if you've worked and paid in a little bit under Social Security, but you know it's not enough that you're going to get a check for more than 943, you may have to apply for both. But the questions are basically the same.
I have a question that you may or may not know.
Sure.
So my son still receives, he's over 18, and he still receives child support.
Child support.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as he is a full-time student, would that be considered, would we still be eligible for it not to be counted dollar for dollar? Or once he's over 18?
Once it's over 18, it counts. Instead of it only counting 2/3, it only counts dollar for dollar.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Because I believe child support would last as long as he has a, before he accepts his high school diploma, as long as he's a full-time student.
It depends on what the divorce decree says.
This is a browser.
Really?
Yeah. I have some where they stop at age 18. I've had some that said where the parent was able to say, my child has a full disability and I expect him to support that child throughout, and they'll get child support for the rest of his life. Okay. So
yeah, I thought maybe through Ohio that was that way, but I wasn't sure.
I think it's county by county, depending upon what your attorney set up with it'll be what your county, your child support agency did.
Yeah.
And what your divorce decree says.
But according to Social Security, it's over 18, it's dollar for dollar.
Over 18, yeah. When traditionally, the reason she's asking that question is for SSI, when a child is under 18, SSI only counts 2/3 of the child support.
Oh my God.
When they turn 18, it's a dollar for dollar offset against the SSI. And sometimes it's because it's just continuing because they're still in school. Sometimes it's the back child support because parent was delinquent at some point, so it continues past age 18. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought somebody said something. So yeah, it's going to be a dollar for dollar offset, I'm afraid.
Well, that's disappointing, but
I know, I'm sorry.
It's a bummer that it's a natural support if it's not quantified by the state as child support, if everybody's in the same household and living.
Well, but now if the child support order is for 3 children, it would only be his third.
What?
So like if that child support, so like if you as a mom are getting child support and you're getting $600 a month, but that $600 a month is for 3 children, then each child gets dinged $200.
Right. Well, yes, if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. I've seen a lot more questions pop into the remarks.
Yes.
Can we just go ahead and ask them somehow?
I can read them for you here.
Okay.
because I've been watching as well. So my daughter will be 16 in October. Did I misunderstand, or may I apply for SSDI because I'm not able to hold a full-time, part-time job because I care for her?
If you are receiving benefits as a child and care parent right now, on the record of somebody who is retired, disabled, or deceased, and they're receiving SSDI dependent benefits, at age 16, your child and care parent benefit would normally end, because they assume that at age 16, your youngest turns 16, you don't need to stay home to take care of the child full time anymore. However, if you go in and apply for disability for them, you can show that you need for that parent benefit to continue even once the child turns 16. Theirs continues till they're 18, whether they're, because they're a minor, because you're having to take care of them.
The
Did
next
that answer?
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Did
go
that
ahead.
answer? Did that answer your question, Michelle?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Okay, thank
thanks.
you.
The next question is, should we start changing our child for, I'm sorry, charging our child for rent before applying for SSI? Isn't the payment eligibility reduced if a child doesn't have to pay rent?
This comes up every single time I do a SALT talk. Here's the problem. If your child has no income, it's a challenge to show that they're paying you rent, but they have no income with which to pay you income. Now, some Social Security offices, not the Hamilton office and not the Middletown office, some offices, when you file for that SSI and they say, are they paying rent or do they have rental liability or whatever, you can say, we have an agreement that the minute their SSI starts, they will pay us $500 a month in rent, flat fee, room and board rent. Sometimes they'll go for that and start the full 943 at the beginning. Most times, especially if you're dealing with the Hamilton or the Middletown offices, they will make you wait till the child is getting, or your student is getting, the SSI benefit, and then can show that they have it and that they are now paying for it. So honestly, it depends on what part of the country you live in or what part of the state you live in and how tolerant and flexible your claims representative is. And that's not a fair answer. It's not a fair policy. It's another policy that they're looking at getting rid of. Just hasn't happened yet. Their theory is that a person that has rental liability needs more money to live on than an individual who doesn't have rental liability. And so therefore, if you have rental liability, you can get the full SSI of 943. And if you do not have rental liability, they reduce that by 1/3. So I haven't had to do it right. 943 divided by 3 times 2 is 628.66. So if you say we have an agreement that they're going to pay me $500 a month rent out of their SSI check, maybe they will. If not, you'll have to show it afterwards. And then it'll go up from the point that they're approved forward. Next question.
Yep. So, do I need to fill out a new application for SSD when he gets his 20 quarters, even though he is still on SSI now. Whoops, it jumped. He is 28, and I asked the related question before. So when do I start that process?
If you set your child up with a My SSA account through that SSA.gov that we talked about, or socialsecurity.gov, both work, you can get a personal earnings statement that will tell you how many quarters they have. The minute you see that they have enough quarters that they would be eligible for a Social Security disability benefit, you call that toll-free number, that 800-772-1213, and you tell them you need to set up an appointment to file for Social Security disability because they now have enough quarters. They're getting SSI, but they now have enough quarters that they could draw under Social Security disability. And that's the easiest way. Social SSI will monitor it. But because they wait till they get to the end, they get the IRS record, eventually it sends an alert. Yeah, 1-800-SSA 1213. But what happens is they're usually a couple of years behind. Now they go back and pay them. So it's not like they lose anything if they're eligible for anything. But that would be the best way to be proactive about it.
Next question. If I start the SSDI application online, if he's approved, would the click start the first of the next month, even if he's not approved for a while? If he
Yes.
fell through the cracks and was never referred.
If you've done the online application, at the very end, it'll say, once you push this button, you can't change anything. When you push the button, it'll say, thank you, your application has been received. It is time and date stamped. You have the ability to print out a copy of your receipt, which not only confirms when you submitted it, it shows every question asked and every answer you gave. So, I mean, I've had some where they have several medical sources that it's like 16 pages long. If you haven't heard anything from social, so like, let's say you call Social Security tomorrow and set up that number with that appointment with the toll-free number to do the SSI part. And that appointment isn't until, let's see, this is May 4th, May 5th, so somewhere in May. Or they tell you that the Middletown office is so full of appointments, they'll call you to get that appointment in. And they'll send them a note. You still have that paper, your receipt from the online part that shows that you've done it online. They have to go back to that date. They have to go back to that date. Although if they didn't call me by on my appointment time, or it'd been a couple of months and I hadn't heard, I'd be going into the office with that receipt saying, I applied for this 2 months ago. Why haven't I heard anything yet about doing that SSI part? But no, you get paid retroactively back to the time you filed.
The next question is, does SSI approval automatically make the student eligible for Medicaid?
Yes. That changed several years ago, yes. In the state of Ohio, you now are automatically eligible for Medicaid if you are approved for SSI. It may take a month or so for the SSI computer to talk to Job and Family Services computer, but you can go into Job and Family Services with your SSI approval letter and say, we need our card.
That was the last of the questions. Oh, wait. Never mind. I was wrong.
How do you show your child is paying rent? Create a receipt. Yes. I did a landlord-tenant rental contract. In my case, my Payee bank account that I have for Andrew was at the same bank that I had a joint checking account of my own. And I transferred his rent money over to me on the first of the month when he got paid. So I had the bank statement. I could show it went from my account into his account. But if you don't have that, you could do a receipt or a canceled check. You know, if you have a Payee account for them, do a canceled check or a money order.
There's another question. If we
Yeah, I know, I'm reading it. Didn't you hear my heavy
Okay.
sigh? You know, I wasn't a good predictor of it when I worked at the agency. So I can sometimes tell when it's going to have to go to an administrative law judge to get approved. What does that mean? You know, Social Security is very black and white on you have to have this IQ, you have to have this range of motion issue, your blood platelet levels have to be at this. I mean, it's very, very black and white. If your child's IQ is under 70, 99.99 times out of 100, they're going to be automatically approved. If they have Down syndrome, they're going to be approved. Believe it or not, cerebral palsy isn't a guaranteed approval if they're at the mild stage right now. So that's why adding everything else together into it has to be done so that we show everything. But let's say your child's IQ is 75 and they have other deficits, but they're harder to define. Well, that's what that remarks section helps with. Showing the other deficits gives them an idea of where else to look for other conditions and situations. But in that first level of a decision and in the first level of an appeal called the reconsideration, it's very black and white. They either make the list or they don't make the list. It's a cliff. You know, if it says the IQ has to be 70 and there's a 71, well, they didn't make it. They're over 70. But when you go to the administrative law judge, he or she can take black and white and make gray. A perfect example is somebody, while I was still working at the agency, mom and dad came in for something, and I don't know how we got into it, but we got talking about their child who was Down syndrome, who was in her 40s. They had never applied for the CDB benefits for their child. And had never applied for SSI either. I don't know why. I don't know how they fell through the crack. I don't know how, when they had filed for retirement, it was not brought up as an issue, but nobody had ever discussed it. So I said, you need to file child and care benefits because mom was staying home helping take care of the adult child with Down syndrome, or trisomy 23 now, I think it's called, I'm sorry. And obviously the adult was not working, hadn't, you know, I mean, not all the medical criteria, but their pediatrician had died. Well, other than being Down syndrome, she didn't have any other real serious medical conditions. So she had been to the doctor for a while. So the first two levels said, we can't get medical records prior to her turning 22 to prove that she has Down syndrome. Therefore, she's denied. Well, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. So they weren't going to pursue it. I says, oh, no, we're pursuing this. So I wrote on the appeal letter to the administrative law judge. Clearly, Susie did not wake up on her 22nd birthday and find that she now had Down syndrome. She has been disabled since birth. There's documentation to show she has this condition now. Obviously, she's had it since birth. We disagree with this decision. They didn't even hold a hearing. They approved it on the record. The administrative law judge has a capacity to use common sense, where apparently the people in the first two levels were not capable of using common sense. Either they had medical records that went back or they did not. So after that, I've just really made sure that if you've got a child with a disability and you think they're going to have trouble with medical records past age 18 or past age 22, because you're not old enough to retire yet, grab them, lock them in a safe place so that you have them. I mean, I felt embarrassed for our agents when they were being denied. So I can probably tell at the when I'm doing the application whether or not you might have to fight harder for it. But I can't just look at it and say, oh yeah, unless it's real clear. You know, I know some of the listings by heart, so I can tell if it's real clear, but not always. Especially mental health, range of motion, intellectual functioning, if the IQ is over 70. Some of those are harder for me to guess. And I can guess, but I can't guarantee, so.
Since you're talking about medical records, Debbie, just a question that I want parents to kind of think about when they're thinking about applying or not applying to Social Security. So let's just say if you apply and Social Security has those records, how long they have them for their life, right? I mean, they have them on file someplace that if you
now that they're held electronically, they're just held. Yeah.
So like if you're a pediatrician or their doctor, so just let's say you apply for Social Security now, and they're receiving SSDI, but then somewhere along the line, maybe they're not getting their benefits anymore, but then you're no longer around or their doctor's no longer around. Maybe they find themselves at 40. Maybe suddenly they have to reapply. Those records should technically still be there from the earlier part, right?
Absolutely. And that's another good reason to apply for the SSI at age 18. Because if they are approved at age 18, that's prior to age 22, they have established that eligibility to disability prior to age 22. They don't, that will stand even if mom and dad don't retire until that young adult is now in their 40s. So, yes, once the disability application has been taken and that medical evidence has been obtained, Social Security does have it. Now, I know when they were all paper files back, say 39 years ago, probably 25 years ago now, before, well, 2000. I know when it happened. It started in 2000. They started doing the electronic application. If there was no disability filed within 15 years of the last action, they would purge that paper file. But now that everything is electronic, there's no reason to purge it because it's not taking up space in a cave underground in Baltimore, Maryland anymore.
Are there any more questions for Debbie? We're getting close to 7:30. I want to make sure everybody had their questions answered. You can throw it in the chat still, or you can unmute and just ask.
You can always email me at getSSAhelp@gmail.com. I will warn you, I'm coming off of a 2.5 week vacation. I have tried very diligently over the last 2 days to respond to the 19 telephone calls and 35 emails that I still had. I'm still working through them. Oh, you're so welcome, Michelle. But you can always email me. I always give advice out for free. You know, if you call and you just say, hey, what do I do about this? You know, the only time I charge is if I do a really serious comprehensive with you, or if I do the disability application with you, or do an appeal for you. Although if you do the disability application with me, I don't charge extra for an appeal.
Or do one of your slides at the end have your email on it? I was just trying to glance through here. Is this your last slide?
Yeah, it does on the very, very last slide. Yes.
There we go. Because I know Debbie's going to be returning. Let's see if I can get my talk to work here. She'll be returning next Tuesday, and we're going to be getting into the next part of Social Security, which is work incentives. But you'll probably review a little bit of the SSI, SSDI just to refresh us a little bit at that point, Debbie, before you.
Of course it will.
Yeah, because yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I absolutely will, especially since there could be some parents who weren't able to make tonight. I want to make sure that they have that information as well. But I mean, that's my website, and
I see. We posted, someone asked about the recording tonight. We did post it here that it will be on YouTube in a few days. It just takes me a few
Okay.
days to get in there. And then someone asked about the email. It's up here on the screen now.
Get @gmail.com, and my email address is getSSAhelp.com
Mm-hmm.
for my website. My website is I'm still working on the free forms. There's a handout for next week. You know, somehow Microsoft went to their suite has gone to this online based thing, and it's not wanting to let me update last year's cheat sheets to this year's amounts and won't let me save it. So I'm fighting with Microsoft right now, trying to get that done. So hopefully by next week, I will have that so that Patty can get that out to you. And then I can get it uploaded onto my website. But my website has my phone number. I will advise you in the event that you are trying to reach me. I usually only work from about 9:30 to 3:30. There are days when I don't work at all. I have stage 4 cancer. And so if I'm really tired, I just don't work. But if you email me, I promise you, even when I was in the middle of the ocean for 2 weeks, I was answering emails. So
She was answering my emails.
yeah, not just yours, let me tell you. I still had 30 left when I got back, but boy, it would have been a lot more had I not been trying to keep up. Because again, as a parent of kids with disabilities, you get that letter in the mail, or you get a phone call, or you have a concern. I get it that it takes it just you need to have that response. And so I try to be as responsible as I can, or responsive as I can. Please don't text me. I hate text messages. And so I ignore them most of all. Email me, and I'll make sure that I get back in touch with you as soon as I can.
There is another question out here, Debbie, just came in. It says, generally, how long does an appeal take with SSI in terms of the details? Meaning he was approved, but I need to now show that he will pay rent and contribute financially to the household.
Okay, once it's approved and he's starting to get his check, and you send that proof in, it usually takes about 30 days for them to process it. It takes 2 months for the money to go up, because the income you have from 1 month counts 2 months down the road. So be patient.
Does anybody have any more questions for Debbie? So I'm going to go ahead, Debbie, I'm going to stop the recording real quick. But if someone, in case someone didn't want to talk while being recorded, or if they want to unmute. So give me a minute to stop that. But I want to thank you again for your presentation. And again, she'll be back next week to do the second part. And I want to thank you all for coming and for those who have listened for our recording. So 1 second while I stop the recording, and we'll open it up for questions if you'd like to ask a question without typing. 1 second.